Talk about the fact that I love movies and TV shows very often, but it is a huge pastime of mine. I always enjoy not only the critical reception of a movie, but kind of seeing how everybody else has responded to it. For me, Game of Thrones was one that I had just never watched. I had heard people say, "Hey, the show is really good," you know, think you really enjoy it. And I always kind of just dug my heels in. I was, it's not really a show for me. So I have been on a watch through of Game of Thrones, knowing beforehand that the last two seasons are known to be just very poorly handled compared to the rest of the show. So I just ended season 6. So I ended when they say the show really starts going downhill. And what I want to give you is a perspective from a writer and kind of tell you my feelings on what I've seen from the show and why I think the writers probably had a very hard time closing out the show in a way that was interesting and as slow paced and everything else as the 6 seasons that preceded. So, firstly, Game of Thrones is known for these huge moments where they kill off main characters. You never know who's going to go. It's really exciting, it's really shocking, but from the perspective of a writer, it also means that that person's storyline is now done. And you still have to fill the time up with something, so you have to keep coming up with new characters or new storylines. The more you kill off your characters, the less people there are to follow, so the less momentum there is for the story. I also think that 6 seasons in, they have definitely written themselves into a corner. Like, there is momentum, but there also is the sense that if they don't have a clear idea of where they're going with this, it's going to be a train wreck. Now, I want to let the writers off the hook a little bit here, because look at the original writer, George R.R. Martin. I believe he wrote himself into a corner that he couldn't get out of, because he still, what is it, almost a decade later, he still has not released the final book. I never read any of the books. I've never really had interest in it, but the fact that I think they said in the middle of season 6 is really when it started going away from the books. But regardless, I don't think even George R.R. Martin knew where he was going. I don't think he had a real end game in mind. And that absolutely would show to the detriment of the ending to the show as it is. Now, one thing that kept me very very hesitant to even start the show was because I knew it did not end well. And so instead, I'm going into it with the perspective of what do I feel the show could have done, or where could it have changed? I'm coming from from the perspective of, I know this isn't going to end well. It sucks that it's not going to end well, because it definitely is a good show and it has a lot of really good moments. And I'm someone who is of the opinion that a show is only as good as its ending, especially if it's a serialized show. If it's a show that the ending really matters. For example, How I Met Your Mother. Not that the show is not enjoyable up to that point, but when you absolutely fumble the whole premise of the show, the rewatchability is no longer there. So it's been an interesting experience, and I wanted to make this video and post it before I continue into these final 2 seasons. I wonder if the fact that I know it doesn't end well will help me lower my expectations, so maybe I won't hate the ending and the final 2 seasons as much as everybody else does. I will definitely do a video once I finish it, and we'll get into spoilers.